Today we are talking about using checks to open up positions. Here we're playing as white. I'm going to fast forward to the part where the critical decision is. We move some pieces around and we get our queen out to f3. And here's where we're kind of put in a tough spot. Black moved its bishop right there to g4. And yeah, we're threatening this pawn, this f7 pawn, but black has the queen defending. And our queen's in a little bit of trouble now because that bishop is defended as well. So what do you do in this spot? Well, one move you have that can be effective is checking your opponent to open up the position. Now, of course,
check.
If we take the queen...
Check.
That doesn't really open up. I mean, it kind of opens up the position, but it's not the best option here. There's actually a better option, and that is to take with this bishop right here.
Check.
Or basically check black with that bishop right there. Now we're forcing black to either move the king or to capture with the queen. Now, we could capture here, right? But that doesn't open up the position. So we want to think on another level here, okay? So, first move is going to be check with the bishop.
Check.
Black takes. Now, we've removed the defender from the g4 square, so we can...
Check.
After black takes, we can capture with the queen right there. Furthermore, now black is in a tough spot here. They move their bishop out of the way. Well, guess what?
Check.
We can put him in check. Bishop goes back. Now we can move our knight into place right here with the idea of getting to the d6 pawn, which is unguarded. Black decides to guard the d6 pawn with the queen right there. We take the queen, black resigns. In this example right here, we have pressure on black's f7 square, but unfortunately black decides to push back and breaks apart our position as white. Black further develops both its rooks, or activates both its rooks, by pushing that knight forward to d7, which also guards the square we want to go back to, which was the e5 square, making it a bad option. So how do we break apart black's position here? Well, we got to be creative. Okay, so you got to think on another level here. So the first thing we want to do is narrow down black's options. So what I came up with here was knight sacrifice to h6, check, with the idea of following up with queen to g4, check, and then forking the knight and getting the pawn out of position where we could open up an attack on black. So that's what I did. I played the knight there, check. Black takes, and then queen to g4, check. Black moves out of the way, and then queen takes the knight there. And essentially, that opened up the position right there. In this game right here, white appears to have a decently defended position. We're playing as black. You may want to take a look at all the pieces here. We got a knight, a bishop, another bishop on b7, a couple rooks, and of course a queen, and a bunch of pawns. So we want to break down this position. You kind of got to think on another level here. So what I came up with here is kind of weird. Remember, we have this bishop on b6. White has a ton of pawns guarding. What I came up with here is knight takes the e4 pawn. Okay. Which white is likely to respond with probably capturing with the pawn right there. Okay, but now remember we have this queen on e7 that's attacking that square. So let's work back to this problem right here. Basically, white has two defenders on the e4 square. So what I came up with is knight takes. They capture with the pawn. And now white's rook on h1 is exposed. Potentially. We have to get there first. So we have this queen protecting that square. We also have this bishop. So we're going to capture with the bishop right there, which puts pressure on white's queen. White has to move the queen back. But we can't get to the rook on h1 because the queen is now protecting that critical f or g2 square right there. So what do you do next? Well, you put the king in check.
Check.
King moves.
Check.
King in check again with the queen. Hopefully I'm not going too fast here. And then white decides to push its knight forward to guard. But one little problem, and that knight is pinned. So that means we can take with the bishop right there. Now, white captures with the pawn. And then we can check with the queen.
Check.
White decides to defend. I mean, white could have defended with the queen as well. But regardless, we're going to win that rook in the corner of h1.
Check.
And that puts
Check.
white in a lot of trouble. White ends up resigning later on here. Oh, and here's another key move here. If you notice, the king is pinned right there, or this bishop is pinned. So we can take this bishop on d4 and move it to f4 because we don't have to worry about it getting captured as long as the king is pinned. White moves the king out of the way, and now we can capture there. So yeah, some cool stuff right there.
Check.
And then I think white ended up losing the queen right
Check.
there, and then they resigned. In this position right here, we're playing as black, and white decides to put pressure on us with that h4 pawn, which happens to be guarded by the rook on h2. So what do we do in this spot? You know, if we do nothing, we lose the knight. So there's not a lot of good choices here, or are there? Well, after thinking this over for a little while, one of the things I realized was, well, first off, this e3 pawn is pinned to the king. So this e3 pawn can't recapture. We also have this bishop here on d6. So what I came up with is knight takes f4. Originally that was a throwaway move, but then I realized that the piece is pinned. If white were to take with a queen, that's not a good outcome. So what does white decide to do? White decides to move its king out of the way, which is reasonable, removes the pin, and looking to consolidate, tighten up its position. So how can we break apart the position more? Well, now we can take this knight and put the king in check.
Check.
With the idea of winning the bishop eventually, but we got a bigger prize in mind, and that, of course, is that rook on h2.
Check.
So we put the king in check. King moves. Now we're going to put the king in check again by taking the rook.
Check.
King's going to take it. Now we're going to follow up with a check from the queen.
Check.
And there's a couple other options here we're going to look at. But the next move, of course, is after white moves its king, is to basically take that free hanging piece right there. We go back. Now we have to move our knight back. And white's going to play for the pin here, but it's not going to matter because we can move our queen as it's not pinned to anything important. And the rooks are safe there. So we can go ahead and use this knight to our advantage here by pushing this pawn forward and then opening up for future potential checks there.
Check.
Like we do right there, the check fork, that's going to allow us to win the A2 pawn.
Check.
Right there. And yeah, some good stuff right there as well. And yes,
check.
we do end up winning the game.
Check.
Later on.
Check.
Through a series of moves.
Check.
And there's that.
Check.
And then the final piece right here. I think I played Rook.
Checkmate.
Yeah, I did. I played Rook to D1 Checkmate. In this game right here, we're playing as white. Black decides to trade queens, which I didn't want to do. So I tried to avoid it, but couldn't avoid it there. We trade queens. Now, we're down material here. We've got 4 pieces, major pieces. Black has 5. We do have 2 very well-positioned pawns, and that's what we're going to use to our advantage here with a series of checks to open this position up a little more. After black takes, of course, we're going to push that F pawn forward.
Check.
Right there, check. Okay. Black decides to move. Our next
check.
Move is a check from the bishop right there.
Check.
Black moves his king again. Our next move is to get... I could have gone for the E1 as well. Well, looking to take out that pawn in the middle, I decided to go for it. I decided to pin, basically, black's knight by moving it to D1. Okay, so black's knight, you see, is pinned. It can't do anything. Black can move the other pieces, a bunch of other pieces there. Black decided to play the bishop to protect it there, and it's also threatening, too. It's threatening the king, so... I decided to gamble a little bit and just push the pawn, the C pawn forward. Now remember, we have this knight pinned right now. Black decides to put pressure on the bishop. Oh, wow. This is great. Now I can move it to F6 right there and then threaten the rook. And then take this E pawn back. Black moves the rook. To protect, now we have to move this because we want to protect that pawn. So we take with the bishop right there. Black decides to move its king to put some pressure. I decided to go with pawn takes. I didn't want to back it up and exchange right there. I did not want to exchange bishops. So if I take capture with the pawn, that solidifies the position and kind of nullifies the value black's bishop, so that's what we do right there. Now we can bring the rook forward and put the king in check, and we're trying to narrow down black's options. Next move, of course, is going to be a check with the bishop. Remember, we have this well-positioned knight. It can guard 2 pieces in the spot, so we're going to
check,
put the king in check, and then try to win the rook right there. But not entirely. The first thing I wanted to do was get the king out of the way, just in case the bishop decided to get a little crazy and take this right here and put us in check. Maybe that's not the best move there, but black decides to go with putting its bishop to C7, looking to trade out pieces. I don't want to do that. Now we can go ahead and take that rook. So we're winning a more valuable piece there. And now we've essentially have black's one and only rook tied up. So the next move, of course, is going to be pawn forward. Black decides to move its king. And great opportunity here. We've got 1, 2, 3 defenders for that D6 square. So, of course, we're going to push the pawn forward.
Check.
For a nice little check fork. And at this point, black decides to resign. Had black not resigned, they only pretty much have 2 options. If we go here, we could check.
Check.
And then we pretty much have a strong winning position right there. In this game right here, we're playing as white. We're looking to break apart black's position, get the rooks involved, and the queen, of course. Key thing to note here is this knight on e5 is protecting that c4 square. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to set ourselves up to get into position to check. So we're going to take that right there. Okay, black decides to recapture. Now we're going to take the pawn, that D pawn right there, and threaten to open up the position a little more. Okay, black decides to threaten with the queen, to which we respond with rook to e1, threatening the discovered check. Black moves out of the way, and now we capture with that pawn right there. Black had a number of options. Black could capture here. Black decides to develop its knight and rook at the same time by capturing with the knight, which allows us to capture. We don't want to recapture. We want to capture that D pawn.
Check.
D pawn check. Again, this check is very important because it limits black's options. As you can see, black can't really move into these pieces. The only piece it can move is the king. It decides to move to G7. Next move is, this is a critical part right here. We're looking to set up a check and stuff. We want to get the queen. We want to get our queen to the C3 square, which it can't go. We also want to be cognitive of the fact that black has a queen on H4 as well as a bishop on A6 that are eyeballing the C4 pawn. We would only have one defender for that. So we're going to take the knight and we're going to move it to B5 with the idea of neutralizing black's bishop. Black decides to put pressure on the knight, to which we respond with a check, which I like to do a lot of times. Is just you check to limit their options. So we play queen there, check. Black moves out of the way. Now we can take this rook and move it to D1, protecting that piece. And here comes the critical move after black. Black decides to move its knight into place. There's a lot of options here. You may want to hit pause and try to think of a good one here. I'll tell you what I came up with. Okay, I trust you've had some time here. Black has a queen, of course, on H4. Black has a rook. There's a way we can win. Remember, we have this queen protecting the F6 square. We have a knight that can go to F6. Now, of course, black could take with a queen, but that's not going to happen there. So we've also got this rook on D1. A lot of options here. Decided to go with knight to F6.
Check.
Check. If black captures with the queen, black's in trouble. Black has a number of options with the king. Black decides to move its king. It's not out of trouble though, because remember we have this rook right here. We can take on D8, which we do. Now black takes with the queen. Do we want to exchange here? Check. No, we don't. We have this rook on D8. We're going to check with that.
Check.
The idea is, and this is where black resigns, that let's say black plays any of these three squares. We'll take this one right here.
Check.
There's a check. Now black's forced into a corner.
Checkmate.
And black loses that way.
Check.
Or,
check.
Let's say black goes here to G8. We take, and, you know,
checkmate.
you get checkmate that way. So black, like I said, resigned at this point right here.
And of course that is going to wrap this up. If you're looking for more chess tips and strategies, be sure to check out the link in the description below for a playlist. There's 3 different ones on this channel, or you can just check out the playlist on this channel. But yeah, the first one we're looking at is chess for beginners. There's a lot of different problems, such as different tactics and strategies, forks, skewers, pins, deflection, all kinds of stuff like that. There's also this game for the PS4 that has its own separate playlist. It's called Pure Chess. You don't have to have a game to look at the problems. There's basically 99 problems in there, anywhere from mate in 1 to mate in 5. I learned a ton by doing these problems, so I think it's very, very helpful. Something definitely worth checking out. Even if you don't have the game, it's definitely worth checking out. And of course, last but not least, there is a third playlist. It's called Chess versus Master AI. Basically, it involves any chess engine that I beat that was on the hardest level when it was made. Did it with a number of different chess apps, as well as the Pure Chess game for the PS4, and I think Majestic Chess. But yeah, there's a lot of different opponents there, and we look at strategies as to how to beat those opponents, which some of them are really, really tough. So you can learn a lot with that too. And of course, that is going to wrap this up. I am signing out. Thanks for watching, and good luck.